I've been married to Emily for 6 years. From the moment we met, I was captivated by her quick wit, her smile that seemed to light up any room, and her unwavering kindness. We were that couple everyone envied, always holding hands, laughing at inside jokes, and standing by each other through thick and thin. Our life together was a blend of shared dreams and quiet contentment. We lived in a modest, cozy home in the suburbs, a house we made our own. Emily worked as an interior designer, and I managed a small but growing tech startup. Despite our hectic schedules, we always carved out time for each other. Date nights, long walks, and lazy Sundays on the couch binge-watching our favorite shows. We've been trying for a baby for a while. It wasn't easy, but Emily's determination kept us going. When she finally became pregnant last year, it felt like the universe had gifted us the missing piece of our puzzle. Our son, Caleb, was born 3 months ago, and life took on a new meaning. Every cry, every sleepless night, and every gummy smile was worth it. Then there was my brother, David. He was a constant presence in my life, a stark contrast to my more reserved nature. He was charismatic, charming, and, honestly, a bit of a flirt. But he was family, and family comes first. David often visited us, sometimes for dinner or to lend a hand with Caleb. Emily and David got along well. I was glad they did. It felt like my family was growing tighter. I had no idea that this bond would become the beginning of my worst nightmare. Life was bustling but beautiful. With Caleb in our lives, every day felt like a new adventure. Emily embraced motherhood with grace, her love for our son shining through in everything she did. She sang to him, cradled him, and whispered sweet nothings while he gurgled back at her. Watching them together warmed my heart. But not everything was perfect. I began to notice subtle changes in Emily. At first, it was easy to brush them off as exhaustion from caring for a newborn. She seemed distracted during our conversations, often staring off into the distance or giving me one-word answers. She was glued to her phone more than usual, always claiming she was browsing parenting tips or messaging friends about baby advice. I didn't question her. Why would I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her before. David, as always, was around. He visited even more frequently after Caleb's birth, saying he wanted to help out and bond with his new nephew. He brought gifts, offered to babysit, and even cooked for us on some nights when Emily was too tired. I appreciated his support. It felt good knowing I could rely on my brother. But there were moments that felt off. Emily laughed at his jokes a little too enthusiastically, even ones that weren't particularly funny. She started dressing up more when she knew David was coming over. Not much, but just enough for me to notice. Her hair would be freshly brushed, and she'd put on a touch of makeup, even on days when she barely had the energy to leave the house. I told myself I was overthinking things. David was family, and Emily was just being polite. Besides, I had my hands full with work and Caleb, so I let those thoughts slide. The tension, though, lingered in the back of my mind. A small, nagging voice I chose to ignore. As the months passed, life continued its steady rhythm, but the unease I felt never entirely disappeared. I tried to focus on the positives, Caleb's first laugh, his tiny milestones, and the way Emily's eyes sparkled whenever she held him. Yet, underneath the joy, a shadow lurked, subtle but persistent. Emily was still attentive as a mother, but her distance from me grew more noticeable. Conversations felt surface level, devoid of the depth we once shared. Our intimacy suffered, too. I reasoned that this was normal for new parents. Exhaustion and stress take a toll, right? David's presence in our lives only intensified. He stopped by nearly every other day, sometimes unannounced, and his interactions with Emily were always casual, at least on the surface. They teased each other, exchanged playful jabs, and shared inside jokes I wasn't part of. I chalked it up to their outgoing personalities. They both had a way of making everyone around them laugh. But there were small moments that began to sting. Like the time David arrived with Emily's favorite dessert, claiming he just happened to pass by the bakery. Or when I overheard him telling her how radiant she looked while holding Caleb. Emily blushed at the compliment, but quickly changed the subject when she noticed me standing nearby. Am I being paranoid? I asked myself repeatedly. I wanted to believe the best in them, my wife and my brother, the two people I trusted most. But it was hard to ignore the weight in my chest whenever I caught those fleeting glances between them. The tipping point came one weekend. I'd planned a surprise date night for Emily, arranging for my mother to watch Caleb. She seemed hesitant at first, saying she was too tired, but I insisted. We ended up at a quaint restaurant, just the two of us for the first time in months. I wanted to rekindle the spark, to reconnect with the woman I fell in love with. But Emily's mind was elsewhere. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she spent most of dinner scrolling through her phone, claiming she needed to check on Caleb. When I asked her if everything was okay, she assured me it was and forced a laugh. I let it slide, convincing myself that maybe she just needed more time to adjust to motherhood. Deep down, though, I felt the distance growing like a chasm between us. I didn't know then that I was standing on the edge of something much darker. It was a Tuesday night when the world I knew began to unravel. I had come home late from work, exhausted but eager to see Emily and Caleb. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the baby monitor on the kitchen counter. Caleb was already asleep in his crib. Emily was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hand, but she quickly locked the screen when I walked in. Her smile seemed forced, her tone overly casual as she asked about my day. I sat beside her, hoping for a quiet evening, but something about her felt distant. Later that night, while Emily showered, I noticed her phone left on the bedside table. It buzzed with a notification. I shouldn't have looked. Some part of me knew that, but the temptation was too strong. The message wasn't from a Jessica or Karen, as the name suggested. It was from David. The text was short, "Can't stop thinking about you. Friday?" I froze, my heart racing as I processed the words. I scrolled up in the conversation, my hands trembling. The earlier messages were innocuous enough, masked in layers of ambiguous emojis and vague phrases. But then came the pictures, selfies exchanged, some flirty, some unmistakably inappropriate. It hit me like a freight train. I felt sick, the air in the room too thick to breathe. My chest tightened as I pieced together what had been happening right under my nose. My brother, my wife. It was unthinkable, yet there it was, staring back at me from her phone screen. When Emily emerged from the bathroom, she noticed the look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Or was it fear? I couldn't tell anymore. "Nothing," I lied, shoving her phone back onto the table. My mind raced with questions, but my emotions were a tangled storm. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. They clashed violently inside me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. That night, I barely slept. Beside me, Emily lay peacefully, as though nothing was amiss. I stared at the ceiling, consumed by the weight of what I'd discovered. I had to know for sure. I had to see the extent of their betrayal. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started digging. I checked Emily's texts, emails, and even her social media messages. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed the truth. What I found only confirmed my suspicions. They had been meeting regularly, under the guise of David helping out or catching up. The messages were explicit, detailing their plans and reminiscing about the times they'd already shared. The woman I had loved, the brother I had trusted, they had torn my world apart. And as much as I wanted to confront them right then and there, I knew I needed a plan. Revenge, I decided, would come later. First, I had to gather everything. I would make sure there was no escape from the truth when the time came. In the days following my discovery, I lived in a surreal haze. The woman I had promised forever to, and the brother I had shared a lifetime of memories with, were carrying on behind my back. It was betrayal on a level I never thought I'd experience. But I held my tongue. I didn't confront Emily or David right away. Instead, I played the part of the unsuspecting husband. I went to work, cared for Caleb, and even smiled when David came over one evening, as if I didn't know he was the snake in my garden. Inside, though, I was boiling. Every laugh between them, every glance, felt like a dagger in my chest. I wondered how I had been so blind. The signs were there, but I ignored them, too trusting or too naive to believe that the two people I loved most could betray me so deeply. One night, I stayed up late, going through everything I had collected. I printed their messages, saved screenshots, and even compiled timestamps from David's visits to our home. The evidence was damning, but I wasn't just angry, I was calculating. I wanted to hurt them as they had hurt me. I wanted them to feel the same gut-wrenching pain I felt every time I thought about what they'd done. Meanwhile, Emily seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil. She was warm and affectionate with Caleb, but with me, there was a growing coldness. When I tried to hold her or kiss her, she pulled away, offering weak excuses about being tired or stressed. It was a painful reminder of how far we had drifted apart, or rather, how far she had chosen to drift away. David, for his part, acted as if nothing was wrong. He laughed with me, joked about old times, and even made plans for a family barbecue at his place. I wondered if he felt any guilt at all. Did he look me in the eye and feel shame? Or was he so consumed by his desires that my feelings no longer mattered to him? I found myself obsessing over the details. When had it started? Was it before Caleb was born, or after? Was I just a placeholder for them to carry on their fantasy? I didn't have the answers, but I was determined to get them. One evening, when Emily was out running errands, I went into Caleb's nursery. He was sound asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. I sat down beside his crib, my heart aching. This innocent child deserved better. Better than a broken home. Better than parents who lied and cheated. A thought crept into my mind, one I couldn't shake. Caleb was my world, the one thing keeping me grounded amidst the chaos. But after everything I'd uncovered, I couldn't help but wonder, was he really mine? The thought that Caleb might not be my son gnawed at me, an insidious seed of doubt I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the betrayal that haunted me now. It was the fear that the life I had built was based on a lie. Every time I looked at Caleb, I saw Emily's features, but I wondered, were there traces of David, too? Was I seeing what I wanted to see instead of the truth? I needed answers, and I couldn't wait for Emily or David to provide them. They were liars, after all. The only thing that could offer me clarity was science. I did some research, my heart pounding with each click of the mouse. Ordering a paternity test turned out to be surprisingly easy. Within days, the kit arrived. I waited until Emily was out of the house, saying she was meeting a friend. I didn't bother asking which friend. I no longer cared about her answers. With Caleb asleep in his crib, I gently swabbed the inside of his cheek, whispering apologies to him as I worked. "This isn't your fault," I murmured, though my voice cracked with emotion. I packaged the sample, added my own, and mailed it off. The waiting would be unbearable, but I knew I had to see it through. In the days that followed, I tried to act normal, though my patience was wearing thin. Emily's every word felt like a lie, and David's every action felt like a betrayal. I avoided spending time alone with either of them, afraid that my simmering anger might boil over. Instead, I poured myself into caring for Caleb, cherishing every moment with him even as doubt clawed at my heart. I thought about what I'd do if the test came back confirming my worst fear. Would I be able to look at Caleb the same way? He was innocent in all of this, yet the possibility that he might be David's child felt like another cruel twist of fate. One afternoon, while scrolling through my emails, I saw the notification. The results were ready. My hands trembled as I clicked the link, my vision blurring as I scanned the page. Then I saw it. The conclusive, inescapable answer. Caleb wasn't mine. The room spun as the words sank in. My breath came in short gasps, and my hands balled into fists. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the realization that my entire life had been built on a foundation of deceit. I stared at Caleb's crib from across the room, my heart aching with a mix of love and devastation. He wasn't my son by blood, but he had still been my son in every way that mattered, until now. Now, I couldn't see anything but David in him. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I sat in silence, my mind swirling with thoughts of revenge, justice, and retribution. Emily and David had taken everything from me, and it was time they paid the price. The revelation that Caleb wasn't mine hit like a wrecking ball. I spent the night pacing the house, alternating between grief and fury. Every fiber of my being screamed for retribution. They had destroyed everything I held dear. My marriage, my trust, my very identity as Caleb's father. Now, they would face the consequences. But revenge couldn't be impulsive. It had to be calculated, precise. If they had built their betrayal in the shadows, I would dismantle it in the harshest light. I spent the next few days methodically gathering evidence. I printed their messages, collected screenshots, and archived every piece of proof I could find. I wanted their lies to be undeniable, their guilt inescapable. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Emily had started talking about wanting a family day to bring us closer together. Her tone was sweet, almost pleading, as if she could sense the distance I was creating between us. She suggested inviting David over for dinner, claiming it would be good for Caleb to spend time with his uncle. The irony made my blood boil, but I agreed, masking my fury with a smile. "Sure," I said. "Let's make it special." On the day of the dinner, I prepared the house meticulously. The dining table was set perfectly, wine glasses polished to a shine. Emily seemed pleased, even relaxed, as she fluttered around the kitchen. She had no idea what was coming. David arrived just before sunset, his usual confident swagger intact. He greeted Caleb first, ruffling his hair and calling him buddy. I forced myself to watch without reacting, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. We sat down for dinner, and the conversation flowed easily. Emily laughed at David's jokes, and he regaled us with stories from his recent trip. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a happy family gathering. But under the surface, tension crackled like a live wire. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to grab a folder from my office. When I returned, I placed it squarely on the table. Emily and David exchanged puzzled looks. "What's that?" Emily asked, her fork paused midair. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm. "Just something I thought we should discuss as a family." David shifted uncomfortably, his smile faltering. What's going on, man?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first stack of papers, their text messages. I slid them across the table, watching as Emily's face drained of color and David's eyes widened in panic. "Care to explain these?" I asked, my voice ice cold. Emily stammered, her hands trembling as she leafed through the pages. I don't know what." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice rising. "You've been lying long enough." David tried to interrupt, but I silenced him with a glare. "And you," I said, my tone venomous. "You betrayed me. Your own brother." Emily started to cry, her face buried in her hands, but I felt no sympathy. This was just the beginning. I hadn't even brought out the DNA results yet. They weren't ready for what was coming next. The air in the room grew heavier with every passing second. Emily's sobs were muffled, and David sat frozen, his usual bravado nowhere to be found. I let the silence linger, making them squirm under the weight of their guilt. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I said, breaking the stillness. "You thought I'd just keep trusting you, oblivious to the lies. But you underestimated me." I pulled out the next document from the folder, the DNA test results, and placed it on the table. Emily's eyes flicked to the paper, confusion etched on her face. David looked at it, but didn't say a word. "This," I said, pointing to the paper, "is proof that Caleb isn't my son." Emily gasped audibly, her face going pale. "What? That's not possible," she cried, shaking her head furiously. "You're his father. You have to be. Stop lying." I roared, slamming my fist on the table. Emily flinched, and David looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "I have the proof right here. Caleb isn't mine. He's yours." I turned my gaze to David, my voice dripping with disgust. "Isn't he?" David's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked to Emily as if seeking backup, but she was too busy sobbing to offer him any support. I stood up, towering over them. "You," I said, pointing at David, "have destroyed our family. And you," I added, turning to Emily, "have destroyed everything we built together." Emily tried to speak through her tears. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whimpered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." "Mistakes don't last for months," I snapped. "Mistakes don't result in a child. You made a choice. Both of you did." David finally found his voice. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. Shut up, I barked, cutting him off. You don't get to apologize. You don't get to play the victim. I stepped away from the table, pacing as I struggled to control the storm of emotions inside me. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined everything. Our family, my trust, my life. It's all gone because of your selfishness. Emily stood shakily, reaching out toward me. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through this. There's no fixing this, I said coldly. You made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences. I looked at David, my anger burning hotter than ever. And you're no brother of mine. You're nothing to me. I turned to Emily one last time. Pack your things and leave. Both of you. You're not welcome here anymore. Emily fell to her knees, pleading, but her words were a blur. David sat in stunned silence, knowing there was no way to salvage the situation. I walked out of the room, leaving them to their guilt and despair. The sound of Emily's cries echoed behind me as I climbed the stairs. This wasn't the end. I had more plans, more ways to make them face the pain they'd caused me. But for now, I savored the small victory of watching their perfect little fantasy crumble into pieces. The hours after the confrontation were surreal. Emily and David didn't leave immediately. Emily tried to talk to me, begging for forgiveness, but I refused to engage. David, on the other hand, kept his distance, perhaps knowing he wasn't safe near me. I stayed upstairs in the guest room, my sanctuary for the night, while they sorted through their mess. The house felt heavy, like it was suffocating under the weight of their betrayal. I listened as they whispered downstairs, their voices tense and desperate. Emily cried intermittently, and David tried to calm her, though his tone was shaky. Good, I thought. Let them feel the fear and panic they'd caused me. By morning, I went downstairs to find Emily packing her things. Her eyes were red and swollen, her movements slow and hesitant. She glanced at me, her face etched with regret. Please, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's talk about this. I shook my head. We're long past talking, Emily. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. You're leaving. What about Caleb? She asked, her voice breaking. He's your son in every way that matters. Don't you dare try to use him against me, I snapped. He's innocent in this, but that doesn't erase what you've done. You'll be hearing from my lawyer about custody arrangements. Emily's face crumpled, and she sank to the floor, clutching her head. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger. Her tears couldn't undo the damage. David showed up later, his face a mix of guilt and frustration. Look, man, I know I screwed up, but you don't have to take this out on Caleb. He doesn't deserve this. I stepped closer to him, my voice low and menacing. Don't you dare pretend to care about what Caleb deserves. You didn't think about him, or me, when you were sneaking around with Emily. David's bravado crumbled, and he backed away. I'll leave. I'll stay out of your life, but just don't punish the kid. Get out, I growled, pointing to the door. And don't come back. He left without another word, his shoulders slumped, his guilt written all over his face. I watched as he drove away, a small sense of satisfaction blooming in my chest. The mighty David, reduced to a shadow of himself. Emily finished packing by evening. She tried one last time to reason with me, but I was resolute. Leave, I told her. Go figure out your life, and maybe you'll realize just how much you've destroyed. She gathered Caleb in her arms, holding him close as she walked out the door. My heart ached as I watched them go, but I didn't stop her. Caleb might not have been mine biologically, but letting go of him still felt like losing a piece of myself. As the door closed behind them, I sat on the couch, the silence of the house pressing in around me. The rage and sadness swirled together, but beneath it all, a strange sense of relief emerged. The worst was over, but the fight wasn't done. Revenge wasn't just about confrontation. It was about making sure they felt the consequences long after they thought they were free. With Emily and David gone, the house felt eerily quiet. But this was the calm before the storm. My next steps weren't about peace. They were about justice. I couldn't let them walk away from this unscathed. They had torn my life apart, and now I was going to dismantle theirs. The first thing I did was meet with my lawyer. I laid out everything, the messages, the DNA test results, the timeline of their affair. My lawyer was stunned at the extent of the betrayal, but assured me that we had a strong case. We prepared for a divorce filing that would be swift and merciless. With the evidence I had, there was no way Emily could contest my demands. For custody of Caleb, I took a different approach. While I doubted I would win full custody, I wanted visitation rights. I couldn't abandon him entirely, even if he wasn't biologically mine. My lawyer agreed it was worth pursuing and began working on the legal framework. Next came David. His betrayal stung the most, and I wasn't content with just cutting him out of my life. He needed to feel the weight of his actions. Through mutual friends, I spread the truth about what he had done. His reputation quickly unraveled. The golden boy who charmed everyone was now a pariah. Friends stopped calling him, invitations dried up, and his once popular social media accounts were flooded with silence. But I wasn't done. David worked in real estate, relying on his reputation to close deals. I reached out to some of his clients anonymously, sharing the truth about his character. I wasn't outright slanderous. I simply provided the facts, leaving them to draw their own conclusions. His professional network crumbled, and I heard through the grapevine that he was struggling to secure new business. Meanwhile, I focused on Emily's family and friends. I wasn't malicious, but I didn't hide the truth. When people asked why we were divorcing, I was honest. Emily's closest friends were shocked, and some distanced themselves from her. The judgment she feared most, public exposure, was now her reality. But the most impactful move came in the form of a letter I drafted to Caleb, something he would read when he was old enough to understand. I didn't want him growing up with lies or half-truths. In the letter, I explained my love for him, my devastation at discovering the affair, and my decision to let him go with his mother. It wasn't meant to vilify Emily or David. It was meant to give Caleb the truth that had been denied to me. Days turned into weeks, and I started to rebuild my life. I found solace in small victories, like seeing David's career falter or hearing through friends that Emily was struggling to navigate life as a single mother. It wasn't about petty satisfaction. It was about reclaiming my power. Through it all, I stayed focused on Caleb. My time with him became a bright spot in the darkness. I wasn't his biological father, but I was determined to be a presence in his life, to show him what real love looked like. Months passed, and the chaos finally began to settle. My divorce from Emily was finalized, and the custody arrangement allowed me regular visitation with Caleb. Though my heart ached every time I saw him, knowing he wasn't biologically mine, I found solace in his laughter and innocence. Caleb was the only part of this shattered life I couldn't let go of. Emily tried to reach out a few times, claiming she wanted to make amends and co-parent peacefully. I kept our interactions strictly about Caleb, refusing to engage in any personal conversation. She no longer had the power to hurt me, and I made sure she knew it. David, on the other hand, had completely disappeared from my life. After his professional and social reputation crumbled, he left town, unable to face the fallout. I heard rumors that he'd started over somewhere else, but I didn't care. As far as I was concerned, he was as good as dead to me. In time, I began to focus on myself. Therapy became a lifeline, helping me navigate the tangled web of anger, sadness, and betrayal. Slowly, I learned to stop questioning why they had done it and started asking what kind of future I wanted for myself. I also found unexpected support in friends who rallied around me. Some had been through similar experiences and offered wisdom that only those who had walked the same path could provide. Others simply listened, their presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. My career became another avenue for healing. Pouring myself into work helped rebuild my sense of purpose, and I even started pursuing side projects I'd put off for years. I realized that the future wasn't something I had to fear. It was something I could shape. But the biggest transformation came in how I viewed Caleb. For a while, I struggled to reconcile the love I felt for him with the betrayal tied to his existence. But one day, as I watched him take his first shaky steps toward me, I felt a shift. Caleb wasn't responsible for his mother's choices or David's betrayal. He was just a child, innocent, full of potential, and deserving of love. I decided to let go of the bitterness that threatened to consume me. My revenge had been served, my justice delivered, but now it was time to focus on healing. Caleb deserved a father who could love him unconditionally, and I decided that I would be that man, regardless of biology. Years later, I looked back on the wreckage of my marriage and realized that it had shaped me into someone stronger. I had lost so much, but I had also gained something priceless, a clearer understanding of my worth and the kind of life I wanted to build. Though I didn't think I'd ever truly forgive Emily or David, I found peace in knowing they no longer held sway over me. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future. And as I watched Caleb grow, I realized that love, even born from betrayal, could still be a source of hope. In the end, I chose to rise from the ashes, not for them, but for me. Did I do the right thing? Write your opinion in the comments.